Number 2. Hélène Loubradou. In late July 1989, 27-year-old Hélène Loubradou, who lived in Toulouse, France, was suffering from a bout of depression, so she checked herself into a hospital in Balma, which is a commune east of Toulouse. On August 16th, she was still in the hospital. That morning, she went to an art therapy class. She was making a scarf for her twin sister's birthday, which was just a few weeks away. Later that day, another patient noticed that Loubradou was missing. The hospital reported her missing to the police that evening. But the police weren't interested in investigating the disappearance. They pointed out that Loubradou was a 27-year-old woman, and if she wanted to disappear, she had that right. They also thought it was possible that she died by suicide, and her body would be found at some point. Loubradou's family was not convinced that either scenario happened. They acknowledged that she had been depressed, but they pointed out that she had been getting treatment and she seemed to be getting better. She had an 8-year-old son, and she had upcoming plans that she was looking forward to. For years, Loubradou's family was left wondering what exactly happened to her. Then in September 1997, an answer may have emerged with the arrest of 32-year-old Patrice Allegra. Allegra had been charged with sexually assaulting and killing 5 women between 1989 and 1997. It is believed that he committed his first murder on February 22, 1989, in Toulouse. On that day, 22-year-old Valerie Thériault was found dead in her home. She was nearly nude, her head was in a puddle of blood, and her hands were bound behind her back. A scarf had been tied around her neck, her underwear had been torn, and pieces of it had been shoved inside her mouth and her nostrils. In the living room there were 2 glasses, and that seemed to indicate that she had a guest in her home before she died. Amazingly, despite the viciousness of the crime scene, the police concluded that it was a suicide. Allegra had worked with Thériault at a cafe, and she was his neighbor. On the night that he killed her, he went to her home and asked her to have sex with him. She refused, so he sexually assaulted her, beat her, and strangled her to death with a scarf. 11 months later, on January 25, 1990, 19-year-old Laura Martina was hitchhiking home. Allegra, who was a neighbor of Martina, picked her up. He tried to kiss her, and she rejected him. This made him angry, so he sexually assaulted, beat, and strangled her to death. He dumped her body in a ditch, and she was found 2 days later. The police investigated the murder, but Allegra was not considered a suspect. A month later, on February 11, 1990, the fire department was called to the apartment of 29-year-old Martine Mateus. Inside her apartment, they found her burned body on her bed. Her body was positioned in a sexual manner, and her wrists and ankles had been bound. Blood was found in her bathroom and on her bra. The fire was started in 2 different places. Something odd that the police found in the living room was a piece of an automatic handgun. The cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, which means she was alive when the fires were started. Once again, despite the brutality of the crime scene, the death was ruled a suicide. Allegra knew Mateus because they had been neighbors for a short time. After murdering Mateus, Allegra seemed to take a 7-year break from killing. Then on February 21, 1997, Allegra went to a bar with a woman. Afterward, he beat and sexually assaulted her. This time, he didn't kill her, and he dropped her off at home. the woman decided to file charges. When the police went to arrest Allegra, they couldn't find him because he had fled. A month and a half later, Allegra still hadn't been arrested. On May 31st, 1997, Allegra broke into the home of a woman they had previously tried to get romantically involved with. She called the police and they arrested Allegra. He didn't have any identification on him when he was arrested, and he gave the police a fake name. The next morning, he was released on bail. A few hours after he was released, the woman whose home he tried to break into went to the police station. After he broke in, but before he was arrested, Allegra either dropped his driver's license or he ditched it in the woman's home. The woman found his driver's license and she brought it to the police station. That's when the police realized that Allegra was wanted for sexual assault. After he was released, Allegra made his way to Verdun, which is a commune in France. In Verdun, he met 36-year-old Michaela Garecht. In exchange for doing work around her property, Normand told Allegra he could stay with her for a few days. On June 20th, Allegra sexually assaulted and strangled her to death. He wrapped her body up in a sofa cover and buried her in the garden. Her body was found 15 days later. By that time, Allegra was long gone. He went to Spain where he met 31-year-old Isabelle Chichery, who was on vacation from Paris. A few months later, in early September, Allegra made his way to Paris. He called Chichery and told her that his car had been stolen. He asked if he could stay with her for a few days, and she agreed. A few days later, on the night of September 3rd, Allegra asked Chichery to sleep with him, and she rejected him. Once again, Allegra snapped. He beat, sexually assaulted, and strangled Chichery to death. He then left her apartment. On September 5th, he went back to her apartment and set it on fire. When the firefighters arrived, they found Chichery's body in the apartment and they called the police in. The police quickly concluded that she had been murdered. The police investigated her murder and they learned from Chichery's friends that she had a house gas before she was killed. The only thing her friends knew about the house gas was that his name was Patrice, he was from Toulouse, and he was a bartender. The police in Paris called the police in Toulouse and asked them if they knew anyone who fit that description. The police in Toulouse told them that they were probably looking for Patrice Allegra. The police then set up a sting for Allegra. They knew he would be looking for a place to hide out. They went to several of his friends that they thought he would call. They told them that if he did call, they should tell him to go to a specific place. Their plan worked. Allegra called one of his friends, and he told Allegra to go to the place that the police had indicated. When Allegra showed up, the police were waiting for him, and he was arrested. While Allegra was in custody, he admitted to the murders of Valerie Thériault, Laura Martina, Martine Mateus, Marielle Norman, and Isabelle Chichery. In February 2001, he was convicted of the 5 murders, and he was sentenced to life in prison. One thing that people had a hard time understanding was why Allegra was able to get away with murdering for so long. He knew his first 3 victims, who were killed between February 1989 and 1990, because he was their neighbor. If one person has a personal connection to 3 victims, logically, they should have at least been considered a suspect. But the police didn't even interview Allegra. Part of the problem was that 2 of the deaths were ruled suicides. This bewildered people as well, because there were clear signs that they were murders. When an investigator was asked why the murders were labeled suicides, his answer only led to more bafflement instead of clarity. He said, "A murderer would not leave so many clues." Then in April 2003, a possible explanation emerged as to why Allegra got away with his crimes for so long. A sex worker, who was only identified as Patricia, claimed that Allegra was a pimp, and he set up S&M sex parties. At these parties were police, politicians, and other influential members of Toulouse society. Patricia claimed that the police gave Allegra special protection and let him get away with murdering women because he ran these parties. Patricia also said that in 1992, she watched Allegra kill a sex worker who wasn't identified and a transvestite named Claude Martinez. Supposedly, Allegra had been ordered to kill them because they were going to go public about the parties. Martinez apparently had some incriminating photos as evidence. Not long after Patricia's allegations were published in a newspaper, a second sex worker and a transvestite came forward and said that the allegations were true. Then a few months later, Allegra also claimed that the allegations were true. He said that in 1992, he did kill a sex worker, Claude Martinez. One of the people accused of being at these parties was Dominique Bodish, who was the mayor of Toulouse during Allegra's reign of terror. At the time the allegations were made, Bodish was the head of broadcasting standards in France. Bodish was anti-pornography, and he had X-rated material removed from France's national television. Bodish went on television, and he vehemently denied the accusations. He said that the allegations were started by pro-pornography lobbyists as a way to smear him. Then, a few months after the first allegations were made, Allegra retracted his story. Bodish felt slightly victorious after the retraction, but he still felt that his name was dragged through the mud by sex workers and a serial killer without much evidence. After Allegra was arrested, the police set up a task force to look into the disappearances of 115 women who went missing in and around Toulouse. The police believe that Allegra killed at least 15 people, and one of them may have been Hélène Loubradou. Loubradou vanished 6 months after Allegra killed his first victim, and 5 months before he murdered his second victim. The police have several reasons why they think Allegra might be responsible for her disappearance. The first is that Allegra had been a patient at the same hospital where Loubradou was staying when she went missing. Also, in Loubradou's diary, she wrote that she planned on meeting a man named Pat at a cafe next to a lake. Allegra was known to go fishing on that lake, and he was a regular at the cafe. A bartender saw a photograph of Loubradou, and he said he saw her at the cafe. He said that she was with a man, and he gave a description of the man. His description sounded a lot like Allegra. Finally, in December 1989, a man who looked like Allegra pawned a piece of jewelry that was owned by Loubradou. The police have not charged Allegra in connection with the disappearance of Loubradou because they said that all the evidence is circumstantial. Allegra has not confessed to being involved in her disappearance. Hélène Loubradou's family believes that Allegra killed her. They hope that one day he'll confess and he'll reveal the location of her remains. Number 1. Michaela Garecht. Saturday, November 19th, 1988 was a cool, sunny day in Hayward, which is a city in the Bay Area of California. Just after 10 a.m., 9-year-old Michaela Garecht and a friend rode their scooters 2 blocks to a store to buy some snacks. When they came back out of the store, Michaela noticed that her scooter had been moved a few feet, so she went to retrieve it. When she did, a man stepped out of his car, which was in the parking lot of the store. He grabbed Michaela around the waist, and she started screaming. He opened the back door of his car, and he threw her in the back seat. He then got into his car and drove away. What happened to Michaela after that isn't known. She has never been found. Michaela's friend witnessed the abduction, and she described the kidnapper to the police. He was in his late 20s, and the most notable aspect about him was that his face was pockmarked or he had terrible acne. He also had dirty blonde hair that was about shoulder length. He was slender, and he was about 6 feet tall. His eyes were blue and described as fox-like. The car he was driving was an older American sedan. It may have previously been in an accident. Also, there may have been cement splattered on the sides of the car. In the days after the kidnapping, the police received a lot of tips, but it didn't lead to Michaela or her kidnapper. Even 30 years later, no trace of Michaela has ever been found, and her kidnapper has never been identified. There have been several suspects over the years. One of the first was a 40-year-old man named Timothy Binder. Binder first came to the attention of the police in June 1988, about 5 months before Michaela went missing. On June 2, 1988, 7-year-old Amber Sports Garcia was skipping rope alone in front of her home in Pinole, California. Pinole is about 30 miles from Hayward, where Michaela went missing. Both cities are in the same county. When Amber's mother went to check on her, she was gone. By nightfall, Amber's neighborhood was being searched. The next day, a pair of pink socks were found near a baseball diamond in Amber's neighborhood. The baseball diamond was next to a creek that ran behind Amber's home. Amber's mother was asked if she recognized the socks, and she said they could have been Amber's, but she wasn't sure. 3 days after Amber vanished, Binder paid Amber's family a visit. He told Amber's family that he tried to save her, but he couldn't. He then showed the family maps of where he thought they could find her. He also told the family that he was sure that Amber was dead and they should be looking for a body. Binder then told the family that Amber's kidnapping reminded him of a crime that happened 4.5 years earlier. 5-year-old Angela Bugay lived with her mother and her 3-year-old brother Chris in an apartment in Antioch, California. On November 19, 1983, Angela and Chris went to a neighbor's home to get some rain boots. Only Chris returned home. A week to the day that Angela went missing, her body was found in a shallow grave in a field not far from her home. She had been sexually assaulted and then suffocated to death. Her murder was unsolved. What Binder didn't mention to Amber's family was that he was obsessed with Angela. The day before Amber went missing, Binder had mailed a letter to Angela's mother. The contents of the letter were not made public. Binder also paid a lot of visits to Angela's grave. In 1 year, he went to her gravesite 90 times. Something odd that the police noted was that 9 days after Angela disappeared, a bloodhound followed Amber's scent to a very unusual place. It was Angela's gravesite. Needless to say, after that first visit, Binder gave Amber's mother the creeps. After he left Amber's home, one of her family members called the police and reported him. An officer pulled him over a few minutes later, and the officer looked inside the van he was driving. He noted that on the walls of the van, there were pictures of children, mostly young girls. The officer had no reason to arrest Binder, so he was free to go. But the authorities were not done with Binder. In June 1988, Binder underwent 3 polygraph exams. He was asked if he was involved in the disappearance of Amber Swartz Garcia. During all 3 tests, he maintained that he didn't know what happened to Amber. The results of the first 2 tests were inconclusive, but the 3rd exam showed clear signs of deception. The FBI was asked to assist in Amber's disappearance. An agent interviewed Binder, and once again, he denied being involved in the disappearance of Amber. He said that at the age of 14, he took a vow of nonviolence. Binder did give the agent his theories on how he thought Amber might have been kidnapped and what might have happened to her afterward. He also gave the agent an eerie prediction. He said that the next girl to go missing would probably be 9 or 10 years old. 5 months later, 9-year-old Michaela Garecht disappeared. Binder, who lived in Oakland, was in Hayward on the morning that Michaela went missing. He had undergone an exam to be a firefighter, and he failed. Before he applied to be a firefighter, Binder had worked for the Social Security office, but he had been fired twice. He was fired for the first time in 1985 because he had been looking up the addresses of little girls who lived in Colorado. Then on their 14th birthday, he sent them $50. In total, he sent $2,000 of his own money. Some of the parents of the girls complained, and Binder was fired. But then his union had him rehired after 16 months. About a year and a half after he was rehired, he was fired again for looking up addresses that he shouldn't have been looking up. One of the addresses he looked up was Angela Begay's mother. After Michaela went missing, Binder went to her family's home and talked to both of her parents. He then started to look for her body. The police learned that Binder was trying to involve himself in the search, and they told him to go home. 2 months after Michaela disappeared, on January 30th, 1989, another girl disappeared. 13-year-old Eileen Michaloff lived in Dublin, California. Dublin is about 10 miles from Hayward, where Michaela lived. Eileen went missing as she was walking home from school. Once again, Binder got involved in the search. Sadly, no one has ever found a trace of Eileen. Despite having a promising suspect, the police couldn't make an arrest, and the cases went cold. On May 23, 1991, just over 2 years after Eileen had disappeared, a woman in Fairfax found a letter in her mailbox that was addressed to her 12-year-old daughter. There was no return address on the envelope. The woman decided to open the envelope, and inside was a letter and 2 collector coins. The letter explained the significance of one of the coins. The letter was signed off TJB, which is Binder's initials. At the time, the woman had no idea who sent the letter. She had never met or even heard of Timothy Binder. A few days later, another letter arrived for the 12-year-old girl. The writing on the letter was backwards, and to read it, the girl's mother had to hold it in front of a mirror. After getting the second letter, the girl's mother went to the police. But since the letters didn't have any threats or sexual content, The police were not interested in investigating the identity of the writer. Days after they went to the police, a greeting card addressed to the 12-year-old girl arrived in the mail. Inside the card was a handwritten Bible quote. The girl's family went to the police again, but they still didn't want to investigate, so the girl's family hired a private investigator. He learned that Binder was sending the letters, and he told the family. Binder had encountered the 12-year-old girl at an Oakland A's baseball game a few days before he mailed the first letter. He got her address from a camera case she was carrying. The family went back to the police, and when they found out it was Binder who was sending the letters, a detective tried to interview him. Binder dodged the detective, and he wrote a letter to the girl's mother saying that he never meant any harm. Then the letter stopped for a while. Nearly 7 months later, just 2 days after Christmas 1991, in Fairfield, 4-year-old Amanda Campbell, who went by the name Nikki, was playing at a friend's home that was 4 houses down from her own home. Sometime between 4:30 and 5 p.m., she got on her bike to ride to another friend's home that was 8 houses down and around the corner. Sadly, she never made it to her friend's home. A search was launched, and later that night, her bike was found a few blocks from where she was last seen. A few days later, a pair of child-sized blue socks were found, but Nikki's parents weren't sure if they belonged to Nikki. Bloodhounds were brought in, and they led investigators to a local cemetery, but no trace of Nikki was found there. Even though Binder lived 40 miles away in a different city, he was the prime suspect. That's because Nikki lived 4/10 of a mile away from the 12-year-old girl he had been sending letters to. The 12-year-old girl wasn't the only person that Binder had been sending mail to. In early December, a few weeks before 4-year-old Nikki vanished, Binder sent a Christmas card to the FBI agent who worked on Amber Sports Garcia's disappearance. On the front of the card was a Russian girl, and she was holding out 4 fingers to indicate her age. After Nikki disappeared, Binder was put on 24-hour surveillance, but they did not find any evidence that he was connected to her disappearance. In early January 1992, Binder sent yet another letter to the 12-year-old girl. He wrote that he was saddened to hear that their neighbor, Nikki, had gone missing. He also wrote that he had looked for the other girls and he would look for Nikki. On January 6, 1992, a couple weeks after Nikki went missing, Binder was arrested. A police officer caught him offering to give 2 12-year-old girls a ride in his van. He was arrested for annoying and disturbing children. It was the first and only time that Binder was arrested. The charges were eventually dropped. After Nikki's disappearance, the rash of murders and disappearances of young girls in the Bay Area came to an end. Binder has always maintained his innocence and claims he's just a good Samaritan. No physical evidence links him to any of the crimes, and he's never been charged in connection with any of the crimes. Binder ended up suing the Fairfield Police Department for defamation. They had publicly named him as a suspect in the disappearance of Nikki Campbell, and they invited members of the media to searches of his home. In 1997, he ended up winning a settlement of $90,000. Binder is still considered a person of interest. 2 years before Binder won his defamation settlement, one of the cases where he was a suspect was solved. In April 1996, the police made an arrest in the 1983 murder of 5-year-old Angela Bugay. They arrested Larry Graham, a longtime suspect in the case. Graham was Angela's neighbor, and he had dated her mother. Graham had previously been accused of sexually abusing a girl, but those charges were dropped. His trial for the murder of Angela started in October 2003, and it lasted 3 months. He was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death. In June 2009, Graham, who was 58 years old, killed himself in his prison cell. Not long after his death, the police announced that they were closing another case. The closure of that case actually began 9 years earlier, on August 11, 2000. On that day, 7-year-old Missy Sanchez was kidnapped from Vallejo, California, as she was walking home from school. 2 days later, Mitzi managed to escape from her kidnapper. A person witnessed her escape, and they gave the information about the kidnapper's car to the police. Not long afterward, 39-year-old Curtis Dean Anderson was arrested for the kidnapping. While in custody, he admitted to kidnapping 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild on December 9, 1999, as she walked to her bus stop in Vallejo. He later killed her and dumped her body. A construction worker happened to find parts of her skull in January 2001. In December 2005, Anderson pleaded guilty to Ziana's murder. For that murder and the abduction of Mitzi, Anderson was given a sentence of 301 years in prison. In November 2007, Anderson was dying from liver and kidney problems. He knew he was going to die soon, and he said he wanted to clear his conscience. He admitted to killing other girls, and one of those girls was Amber Swartz Garcia. Anderson said he just happened to be driving in Pinole when he came across her. He said that he took her to a motel room, and he suffocated her. He said that he dumped her body near Benson, Arizona. Searches for her remains were conducted, but nothing was found. The police looked for evidence that would back up his confession, but they couldn't find any. But they also couldn't find any evidence to refute his confession. On December 11, 2007, Anderson, who was 46, died in prison. After he was dead, the police decided to close Amber's case. Amber's family doesn't think that Anderson killed her, and he was just lying for attention. Amber's mother convinced the police to reopen Amber's case in 2013, and as a result, it's still considered unresolved. In January 2012, a new suspect emerged in the disappearance of Michaela Garecht. In a letter to a newspaper in Stockton, a man on death row named Wesley Shermantine accused his former partner in crime, Lauren Herzog, of killing Michaela. Shermantine and Herzog were a pair of serial killers known as the Speed Freak Killers. The pair were childhood friends, and they grew up across the road from each other in the small town of Linden, California. Shermantine and Herzog were well known in their town because they were meth-addicted troublemakers. It's believed that they committed their first murder in September 1984. They were high on meth, and they were driving home after a night at a casino. They happened upon 41-year-old Henry Howell, who was parked on the side of the highway near Hope Valley, California. Either Herzog or Shermantine shot him once in the back of the head. 2 months later, in November 1984, Herzog and Shermantine were driving on Roberts Island, and they came across a parked car. They got out of their car and shot the driver of the other car, 35-year-old Howard King. Then they dragged the passenger, 31-year-old Paul Kavanaugh, from the car. He was then shot at point-blank range with a shotgun. King and Kavanaugh's bodies were found on November 27th. There was no motive for the three murders other than the thrill of killing the men. At the time of the shootings, Shermantine was 19 and Herzog was 18. The police were baffled by the shootings, and it wasn't long before the investigations into them went cold. 10 months later, on September 4th, 1985, Herzog and Shermantine convinced 24-year-old Robin Armtrout to go for a drive with them. Her body was found on the side of the road 4 days later. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed 46 times. During the investigation, Shermantine and Herzog weren't considered suspects. A month later, on the morning of October 16, 1985, the mother of 16-year-old Chevelle Wheeler dropped her off at school. But Chevelle did not attend any of her classes and she didn't come home. Her family reported her missing that night. The police learned that Chevelle skipped school to go hang out with a friend. That friend was Wesley Shermantine. Shermantine was asked about Chevelle's whereabouts, and he said he didn't know what happened to her. The police searched a hunting cabin owned by Shermantine's family. Inside, they found several drops of blood. Shermantine said that the blood was from hunting. At the time, the police could not test the DNA, so they weren't sure who the blood belonged to. Since Chevelle was missing and the police didn't have any evidence that she was dead, they could not arrest Shermantine for her murder. After that, Shermantine and Herzog seemed to go quiet. Then 13 years after Chevelle disappeared, on November 14, 1998, 25-year-old Cindy Vanderheiden went missing after spending the evening at a bar that was owned by her father. She was seen leaving the bar with Shermantine and Herzog. They became the first suspects in her disappearance. In January 1999, Shermantine's car was impounded and searched. The police found blood inside his car. They had that blood tested, and they also tested the blood that was found in his cabin in 1985, which they believe was the blood of Chevelle Wheeler. It turned out that the blood in the car was Vanderheiden's, and the blood in the cabin was Chevelle's. On March 17th, Shermantine and Herzog were arrested for the two murders. In custody, Shermantine refused to cooperate with the police. Herzog, on the other hand, openly confessed. When Shermantine and Herzog were arrested, the police had no reason to suspect them in the murders of Henry Howell, Paul Kavanaugh, Howard King, and Robin Armtrout. So Herzog surprised them by saying that he and Shermantine killed them. Herzog said that Shermantine was the leader in the murders, and he minimized his own role in the killings. One thing that Herzog wouldn't do was reveal the whereabouts of the remains of Cindy Vanderheiden and Chevelle Wheeler. Shermantine was convicted of the murders of Paul Kavanaugh, Howard King, Chevelle Wheeler, and Cindy Vanderheiden in February 2001. Shermantine said he would reveal the location of Vanderheiden's remains in exchange for money, but her family refused to pay. A month after he was convicted, Shermantine was offered a plea deal. If he revealed the whereabouts of the remains of Chevelle and Vanderheiden, he wouldn't face the death penalty. Shermantine turned down the plea deal, and he was sentenced to death. In October 2001, Herzog was convicted of the murders of Cindy Vanderheiden, Paul Kavanaugh, and Howard King. He was also convicted of being an accessory after the fact in the murder of Henry Howell. He was sentenced to 78 years in prison. But then, in 2004, Herzog's convictions were overturned. a judge ruled that he had been unlawfully questioned. He made a plea deal where he would plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter in the death of Cindy Vanderheiden. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison, which included the 6 years he had already served. In September 2010, Herzog was paroled and he moved into a trailer on the prison grounds. About a year and a half later, in January 2012, Shermantine told the police that he would reveal the location of the remains of some of their victims. He also said that one of Herzog's victims might have been Michaela Garecht. Shermantine pointed out that Herzog looked a lot like the sketch of the kidnapper. Also, Herzog had family that lived a couple miles from where Michaela went missing. But the police were never able to ask Herzog about Michaela's murder. On January 16, 2012, the day he found out that Shermantine was cooperating with the police, Herzog hanged himself. He was 46 years old, and he was about 3 months away from having more freedom on his parole. Investigators believe that Shermantine started cooperating with the police as a way to get revenge on Herzog for confessing when they were first arrested. On February 9, 2012, some of Chevelle Wheeler's remains were found on a property that was owned by Shermantine's family. The next day, the remains of Cindy Vanderheiden were found in some foothills in Calaveras County. The day after that, the police went to a field in Linden that Shermantine called Herzog's Boneyard. The police dug up an old well, and they found thousands of bones. It turned out that the bones belonged to 3 females and a fetus. One of the victims was 19-year-old Kimberly Ann Billy, who went missing from Stockton on December 11, 1984. Another set of remains was 16-year-old Joanne Hobson, who disappeared from Stockton on August 29, 1985. The police were not able to identify the third set of remains or the fetus. What the police do know, thanks to DNA testing, is that the third set of remains is not Michaela. So at the time of this video, it's not known if Herzog killed Michaela Garecht. The police said it's possible that he did kill her, but there is no evidence to prove that. Shermantine said that in the future, he may reveal the locations of more remains. It's suspected that the speed-free killers murdered at least 19 people. There is some speculation that their true body count is 72, if not higher. At the time of this video, the November 19, 1988 disappearance of Michaela Garecht remains unsolved. Michaela's family still holds out hope that she is still alive. The disappearances of Amber Swartz Garcia, Eileen Michaloff, and Nikki Campbell, who all went missing between June 1988 and December 1991, all remain unresolved as well. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, please go to criminallylisted.com where you can suggest cases, buy merch, and find out about an exclusive podcast. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.